Let me ask you a question. What exactly do you consider a late night out? Seriously, take a second and think about your typical weekend. Are you heading out around, say, 9 or 10 p.m., maybe grabbing some food, hitting a local spot, and then wrapping up around 1 or 2 a.m.? You grab a cab, head home, and feel like you've really, stretched the evening. Well, if that sounds familiar, you are going to have to completely rethink your entire weekend schedule. In this explainer, we're diving into some absolutely fascinating source material that literally redefines the whole concept of an evening out.
So, welcome to our cultural deep dive. Today we're decoding a phenomenon known as Noite no Brasil. Now, literally translated, that just means night in Brazil, but culturally, culturally it is an entirely different reality. It's got its own rules of endurance, its own pacing. We aren't just talking about a physical location where people happen to be awake after dark. No, it's a completely distinct environment, like a totally separate ecosystem with its own unique relationship to the clock.
Okay, let's dive into this. The absolute first thing you have to do is entirely rethink your party clock. Seriously, if you step off the plane and try to apply your standard hometown weekend schedule to the Brazilian nightlife scene, you are going to crash before things even start. Actually, scratch that. You won't just crash, you'll find yourself completely out of sync, exhausted, and probably heading to bed right when the rest of the city is actually waking up to go out. You absolutely must recalibrate your stamina if you want to survive. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between expectation and reality. At home, late might mean midnight, right? But here, that standard expectation just doesn't apply at all. Late is literally just the prologue. It's the jumping-off point for an evening that completely stretches the very definition of tonight well into tomorrow. It's this crazy escalating scale where starting late is really just a warm-up for finishing even later. Now, what's really interesting about this compounding sequence is that it basically serves as a literal survival guide for travelers. It boils down to two simple steps. Step 1, start late. You don't rush out right after dinner, you wait, you conserve your energy. And then, step 2, finish even later. Whatever boundary you thought existed for the absolute end of the night, push it back, way back. This sequence implies a seriously required level of endurance. Because you see, this isn't just some quirky scheduling difference. It's not a simple delay in dinner plans. What we're actually looking at is a fundamental shift in how time flows during a Brazilian evening. It's a continuous chronological shift. Think of it this way. If you sprint right at the beginning, you will absolutely never make it to the end. The Brazilian night isn't a 100-meter dash. It is a full-blown marathon. You have to adapt to a rhythm where the absolute peak energy of the evening hits at an hour when you'd normally be sound asleep in your bed. Let's see how this builds, because when you map out this timeline, the delayed sequence is incredibly clear. You start late in the PM, right? You're pacing yourself, conserving that energy, and then you push deep, deep into the AM hours. But here's the kicker. Your endpoint isn't 2 a.m., and it definitely isn't 3 a.m. The endpoint is sunrise. That chronological shift from PM to AM to literal daylight is the defining roadmap of Noite no Brasil. And as you move through those deep, dark AM hours, you eventually approach the ultimate climax of the night, the sunrise finish line. Just think about that for a second. The rising sun, which for most of the world signals, the beginning of a new workday and pouring that first cup of fresh coffee, it serves an entirely different function here. In the context of Brazilian nightlife, the sunrise is the checkered flag. It is this incredibly awe-inspiring, natural conclusion to the evening's events. So the crucial point here, the absolute golden rule straight from our source material is simple. Don't be surprised if you get home when the sun is rising. This is genuine, explicit insider advice so that you aren't caught off guard. Because if you aren't mentally prepared for that glorious, blinding morning light hitting your face as you finally unlock your front door, man, the sheer culture shock will hit you so hard. So, for sure, expect the daylight. So, you now know the reality, right? We've walked through the timeline. You know you have to start late, push through to finish even later, and keep going until that sun actually comes up. But, as we all know, knowing the timeline is one thing. Actually living it is another entirely. So the real question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you know the true meaning of Noite no Brasil, do you actually have the stamina for the Brazilian sunrise? Thanks so much for exploring this with me, and I'll catch you next time as we dive into another fascinating explainer.